invite Ana Maria Basan, who will give us some context to some of the amazing work that she's been achieving.
Thank you for the introduction. I'm not used to being behind a podium. I usually like to walk around, but it's okay. I'll sacrifice for tonight. I will give you some background on my career and why I decided to do what I do. And then we'll jump into Asylum, domestic violence victims. And then I will give you an overview of my approach at my law firm. I must say that today, more than ever, I would not want to be doing anything else but representing immigrants and particularly victims of domestic violence. I've always had an interest in human rights and civil rights, and I was confused as to what I wanted to do. I continued my studies. I went to college, I went to graduate school, and I got a master's in Latin American studies. And I said to myself, do I really want to continue and be a professor, be an academic, and teach about this, which I was very interested in. And then I said to myself, no, be real. You're more practical than that. You need contact. You need to represent people. You need that gratification from dealing with people directly. And I learned about myself, and I decided to apply to law school. I went to law school. I didn't like the first year, I'm going to be honest with you. And I was ready to quit. And then I was lucky to be accepted at Greater Boston Legal Services for a wonderful internship representing asylum seekers from Central America. And then I left law school again. I went back. I finished law school in 1997. And then I fell in love with immigrants and immigration law, and representing all kinds of immigrants. I handle all kinds of immigration practice, including asylum. It's not just asylum. It's actually a handful of asylum cases that I have now, currently. I represent a lot of domestic violence victims, handling VAWA cases, U-Visa cases, and I also practice in other areas, family law, workers' compensation, divorces, and other things. I have worked with hundreds of victims of domestic violence. For some reason, I end up having that call, I guess, that people come to me and they trust me and they confide in me, because it's not easy. We're not just attorneys. We don't just go to court. We develop skills, social worker skills, psychological skills. We need all kinds of skills to actually get the story from these victims. And by the way, they're not all women, as you may know. They're also men and children, but mostly women. Now, there's nothing more gratifying to me than the work that I do, to see how the victims come to my office, not even wanting to look at me, not even wanting to tell me their story, and then after 3 meetings, 10 meetings, 20 meetings, after 3, 4, 5 years of going through therapy and going with them to court and handling the case and getting the case finally approved is an amazing feeling. And then you see them progress. You see how they come to you, not even wanting to look. Their demeanor is all, right, introverted. They don't want to say anything. And then they bloom after years of having therapy. It actually happens when they're free from violence, when they meet a partner that actually loves them. And it's the most amazing experience. I get my hair standing up on the back of my neck when I speak about it. So I just want to also emphasize that there's some misconceptions about who asylum seekers are and how many there are, right? We see in the media and it's almost like, they're coming to this country and they're taking away jobs, and there's so many of them. There's thousands of them crossing and applying for asylum. There aren't too many, actually. To give you some numbers, about in 2017, out of 1,127,000 people that applied for green cards, only 2.3%, which is only 25,000 out of that million, were asylees. So it's very few, and of course, fewer that actually obtain the status. There's more that apply and fewer that obtain it. Now, I'm going to talk about asylum. I'm going to talk about domestic violence, but I just want to give you that background so that you understand what we're talking about. Immigration law is extremely difficult and complex. It's not what people think. A lot of immigration preparers and unscrupulous lawyers make it seem that it's just completing paperwork, and it isn't. You have to have skill, you have to have knowledge, particularly with asylum cases. So, who qualifies for asylum? A person has to establish that he or she has been persecuted or has a well-founded fear of future persecution on account of 5 grounds. I promise I won't bore you with legal terms all night. Just bear with me for 2 minutes on this, okay? Listen to it carefully. It's only on these 5 protected grounds that I'm going to mention in a minute. Is unable or unwilling to avail him or herself of the protection of his or her country, meaning they cannot be protected in their own country and they're fleeing persecution, and that's why they're coming, because they're afraid of being tortured or killed. And they're fleeing their countries because they fear persecution. And it can only be based on 5 grounds. It can't be somebody robbed me and hurt me and raped me on the street that I don't know. Okay, it has to be under these 5 grounds, either religion, political opinion, membership in a social group, race, or nationality. It can be one or all of them, right? Any of those grounds. Sometimes we attorneys have to be very creative in thinking we have to combine these grounds because there's political, there's membership in a social group, there's also race, right? If the person is indigenous, we throw everything we can to make it happen. So in this context of domestic violence and asylum, we're talking about membership in a social group, so that domestic violence victims fall within the definition of asylum within membership in a social group. So that while many victims of domestic violence were able to obtain asylum through 2014, through the decision in matter of ARCG, this is no longer the case. Meaning before June 11, 2018, we were able to defend anyone, including women, men, and children who were victims of domestic violence in their home countries and obtain asylum for them. Now, starting June 11, 2018, Attorney General Jeff Sessions single-handedly changed the way that domestic violence victims must seek protection. He overruled the Board of Immigration Appeals precedent decision in matter of ARCG, and essentially, this means that domestic violence will almost never qualify an individual for asylum. Of course, as lawyers, we look in to see if there's other grounds that the person may qualify for. But even such is actually also affecting those other grounds, because it's creating negativity towards any kind of asylum seeker. When we discuss the decision that Attorney General Jeff Sessions has made concerning asylum for domestic violence seekers, we're talking about how one man's decision, one government's decision is affecting thousands of people. Now, I want to be clear on something. There's a legal basis for seeking asylum. Anyone can legally apply for asylum. The U.S. recognizes the right of seeking asylum as outlined by U.S. and international law. What very few people don't realize is that U.S. law specifically creates the ability of both documented and undocumented individuals to ask for asylum. They can cross the border unlawfully because they're being persecuted and they're fleeing persecution to seek asylum. They can try coming lawfully, but it's almost impossible. It's very difficult to get a tourist visa or refugee status abroad. If you don't believe me, you can check the Immigration Nationality Act, Section 208A, Section A1. Now, since I have to jump and do this in 20 minutes, we're going to connect what I just said to how it affects real people. I have 2 stories that I want to share with you. They're very short. Don't worry, you won't fall asleep. But you will get depressed. There are 2 stories of 2 women, one before sessions and another after sessions, meaning one that was lucky to get asylum and the other one that wasn't so lucky. These are real stories. I'm not making them up, but I'm not using names, and I have my staff, my wonderful staff, join me in reading these quotes from these women. Go ahead.
I was placed on a bed of ants to bite me until I passed out. I only had one dress, and when a neighbor gave me her clothes, my mother burned all of them. I was not sent to school because school was only for boys. I snuck books into my room to learn to read and write, and I taught myself to do so. I left Guatemala because of this persecution I suffered at the hands of my mother and my 3 partners after, who also abused me and raped me. When I went back to my mother's house for her to rescue me from my husband's abuse, I was beaten by her and sent back to live with my abusive husband. I made it to the U.S. and left the only thing I love the most in the world back in Guatemala, my children. I survived the trip for them so that they could still have a mother. If I had stayed in Guatemala, my ex-partner would have murdered me. Thanks to the U.S. laws, I was granted asylum, and now I'm a resident, and I was able to bring my children and reunite with my family.
This client has inspired me to the point that every time I feel down or I have any obstacles in immigration court as a woman, as Latina, as anything, I think of her and I think if she endured all this abuse, this is nothing what I have to go through for her or for anybody else. So when she first came to my office, she actually came with one of her abusers. I didn't know that, the father of her children, but he lives here. And so he did the talking at my office. And I saw her, very physically upset and shy and introverted, didn't say a word. And they just basically said she witnessed a murder in Guatemala, and that's why she came, which was true, partly true. And I said, oh boy, that's it? Is there anything else? I try to ask all the questions I usually do, nothing. I sensed there was something else was going on, but she wasn't telling me. So what I did was I got her phone number and called her for a second consultation to come alone. Thankfully, she was able to do that, and that's when I asked her all the questions. And she confessed to all the abuse she had been through with her partners, but she did not want to talk about the abuse that she went through with her mother. It was so painful for her. Until this day, she, of course, doesn't want to talk about it. So when I got all the facts out, I knew I had a strong case. It was based on both membership in a social group as a victim of domestic violence, and it was also based on political opinion because she had witnessed a murder of a drug dealer, and the drug dealer was threatening her. And so we try to get other categories to fit. We were successful. The judge was very tough, but we were successful, and we were able to bring her 4 children to the United States. And one of her daughter, the eldest daughter, she had a child, and we couldn't bring the grandchild because only the children derive status. If the mother gets asylum status, the derivative children can come, but not the grandchildren. Eventually, we brought the grandchild through a humanitarian visa, and they're all here, and they're all working very hard. The daughter's a nurse assistant, and she's a lawful permanent resident now, and they all work 2 jobs, the mom, the daughter, and the small kids go to school, and they're doing really well. So let's talk about my second client after the decision of Attorney General Jeff Sessions.
Although I didn't get deported, I lost my asylum case. This decision has left me so down. I have been tired of fighting for myself. I wonder if I even matter anywhere, or if anyone even cares about what happens to me. The feeling of being alone and unwanted in a country with no certainty has pushed me to places I never imagined before leaving Ecuador. My past still haunts me, and I constantly wonder if things will actually get any better. I desperately miss my children and wonder every single day if I will ever get to hold them again. My ex-partner made me believe I did not matter as a woman, as he brutally raped me and sodomized me every single day. Sometimes I even try to justify what he did, saying I deserved it because all women are worthless whores. What used to be my pride in my family's indigenous traditions became his constant source to shame and to humiliate me. No more long hair, no more colorful beads. I lost who I was until the beatings became unbearable. So I left, found a good job, and tried to make myself. For a while I was happy. I realized this was all a fantasy when he found me hours away and beat my entire body while people stood by and watched. He said he would kill me the next time if I didn't get back together with him, and I knew it was true. After someone called the police, but they never came to help and never answered the phone.
This lady, when she came to me, she had a fantastic case before the decision on June 11th. And I had written, I think, a 15-page legal memo with all my arguments. And the only issue that she has was the 1-year issue, that you have to file for asylum within 1 year of arriving. And that was the only obstacle I had. And then after June 11th, I had to shred my memo because those laws didn't apply anymore because of the decision. So I had to start all over again, thinking, okay, well, she's indigenous. We can argue race. We can argue political opinion because women in Ecuador are mistreated, and the government has no relief for them. There's no domestic violence counseling nearby, there's no hospital nearby, and there's no therapy she could receive, any kind of education. She went to school, she learned, she became a seamstress, actually. She didn't go to college, but some institution that she went to. And she had a pretty good job and a pretty good life before she met this guy. And he really wanted to hurt her so much that she had to leave her children. And she said to me, I don't want to be here. I want to go back to be with my children, but I can't because I'll be killed. And she came to me 2 days before her individual hearing, which is like the trial of the case, 2 days before my birthday. And I said to her, are you kidding? I'm not going to take your case 2 days before the individual hearing. No lawyer does that. And so I said, well, let me look into your case. Okay, let's see. I looked into it. I asked the questions. And then she said, I went to this lawyer. And then what happened? He told me I had a weak case because I never called the police. And then I went to another lawyer, and he wanted $6,000. I didn't have $6,000. Then I went to a nonprofit organization, and the sister told me that my case was too weak, that more than a year had passed and I hadn't filed, and that they weren't going to take the case. And they had many years, like a waiting line for a long time. So this lady kept registering with ICE at court. She kept doing what she had to do, and nobody ever told her she needed an attorney she was going to have a trial. Nobody prepared her. So finally, she goes to a private attorney, and she does more harm than good. She didn't prepare her for her trial. She thought it was just another master hearing and did not prepare her at all. So this is 2 days before the trial. And so when I saw that there was ineffective assistance of counsel, I had an argument to make to substitute counsel. I made my motion. I went on my birthday to her hearing, and the judge was upset with me. He said, you want to handle the case? You do the trial today. I said, Judge, I just got the case 2 days ago. Well, you want me to substitute? I'll substitute. I said, Judge, there's ineffective assistance of counsel. Oh, okay. Let's hear it out. The attorney thankfully confessed that she had made a mistake. Well, her assistant in her office had made a mistake and so forth. So to make the long story short, she hadn't done much. She just filed a skeleton asylum application for her. That's it. No evidence, no preparation whatsoever. And the judge gave me about 5 months, and this is when all the change started and all of that. And so this is a case that we prepared so much. We spent countless hours, and my staff could tell you, there's 3 of them here, countless hours trying to get the story straight and get all the facts that we could possibly get. We're ready for trial. We go so she could testify. The judge said, I don't want to hear it. If we go through trial, I'm most likely going to deny it because of the Attorney General's decision in matter of AB. I said, but judge, because I was prepared with all my arguments, right? He wasn't supposed to refer this case to himself. There's a lawsuit against him. There's judges that have written amicus briefs against him. I mean, all these arguments that I could possibly make. He said, counsel, I've heard them all. I've heard all the arguments you're making. But I'm not gonna go through it. I mean, you can go through with it, but he looked at his watch like, we need to go. And so I spoke to my client, and we together made a decision. She made the decision after I explained to her the government was offering withholding of removal, which means that they can prevent her from being deported. She can work here lawfully, but she doesn't get asylum, so she doesn't get her kids. So she understood that it was a very difficult decision, but she made a decision to accept it, the withholding, and stay. After that, she disappeared. She didn't call us back. We tried to reach for her to see how she was doing. It took her about a month to call us back or more. And she finally said, I have a job, I'm okay. And so we're hoping that this rule will change, that this world will change, that you here can contribute. I mean, we need professors to be expert witnesses. We need students to be good, honest immigration lawyers, or not, but advocates, whatever you want to be. But please volunteer, advocate, speak up for these vulnerable individuals. Lastly, I would like to talk about my approach, and then I'll be done. Is that okay? Okay. I'm a solo practitioner. I'm the only attorney in the office, and I have a few paralegals, and I'm in Jackson Heights, Queens, the most diverse place in the world, actually. And I'm very proud to be one of the 2% of Latina lawyers in the country. There's about 36%, according to the American Bar Association, 36% female lawyers. And out of that, there's 5% Latinos, and out of that, there's about 2% Latina lawyers. Sometimes when I've been in court, I've been confused for being the client. Even if I wear my suit, even if I'm carrying my briefcase, a male judge said to me, is your lawyer coming? I said, Judge, I am the attorney. The whole courtroom was like, oh no. Even the men were afraid of what I was going to respond. I don't know. I was nice that day. I'm usually not. I get feisty with male lawyers, particularly trying to, patronize me. There have been several instances of hardships, but like I said, they don't amount to the hardships that my clients go through. So I combine my law practice. I don't see myself just as an attorney. I see myself as an advocate. I do come from the nonprofit world, so my heart is still there, and I still want to change the world. And I'm still as ambitious and radical as I was 21 years ago. And I find this practice, if anybody's interested, to be very unique. Immigration practice is very unique. It's not like doing personal injury. Torts, pretty simple. Somebody gets into a car accident, you help them out, you call the insurance company. We're talking about feelings and torture stories that you hear daily. These two stories, we hear this all the time, thousands of them. Perseverance is one of the things that I like to utilize in all my cases. I don't give up. I keep asking, you sure you didn't call the police? You didn't call the police. You tell us you didn't call the police. Are you sure you didn't call the police? We asked about 10 times. Finally, this last woman said, somebody else called the police. I said, oh my God, why didn't you tell me this before? And she said, well, you didn't ask. You asked if I called the police. And it turns out that was a very important factor for the case, because you have to prove that your country cannot protect you. That's why you're coming here. So not calling the police is a problem. Now, in that instance, somebody else called the police and the police never answered. So also, some challenges that we encounter are that victims don't call the police because they're afraid, or the police are corrupt in their countries. So they say to me, it's useless. What am I going to call for? I know that they don't answer or they don't come. And they say it's personal problems. Domestic violence are personal problems. Why we're not going to get involved. That's what they tell them. And another challenge is that it's a matter of life and death. It's like being in the ER room. It's my responsibility to get this case done and approved. And I don't take it lightly. I take it very seriously, maybe too seriously. And I just want to say that these women are the ones, victims, and mostly women, are the ones that inspire me to do what I do. And even though sometimes I do get stressed and depressed when I watch the news and when we face these policy changes, I get encouraged by what we can do. Thank you.